Are we back? I think we are maybe finally back. Like I said, I blame the World Cup. It's almost as if the place that I live decided not to do any infrastructure for that. So that's super cool. Really glad they did that. So good. So good. So we're going to pick up from where we were, I suppose. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure. I think everything's set. Just trying to make sure real quick. I think everything's going well. Everything is working the way it should. Like this last bit down here. I think we are otherwise good. And I really very upset with how things have gone lately with the streaming. It's incredibly scuffed. Really kind of there's nothing I can do to prep for internet issues. No way to sort of avoid that, and they just happen randomly. Especially this week. Like I said, I'm blaming the World Cup. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people here that normally are not using the internet at this time. And of course, we provided no infrastructure upgrades to help with that. So that was smart. Smart. Yay, late stage capitalism. And it's a bit of a down. Let's get back to what we were talking about, which was our mine treasure. So let's get back over there. Alright, we're just going to pick this up from where we were. So, talked about the magic items. We did everything there. Magic items, I do have a magic item thing that talks about minor magic items versus major magic items, but that's a thing they introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything and then quickly threw to the side and decided that's not actually important and we don't care about that. Which is fantastic. So the last thing that we want to talk about is planned treasure. So if you are picking up on this randomly on the VOD or the stream randomly, thanks for showing up. But I'm going to tell you that this stream got interrupted, so there's actually a stream that's most of the stream prior to this. I guess I'll have to turn this into a part 2 or maybe try to download and stitch these together. I hate to do that, but and re-upload it, but I might have to do that. I wish the internet situation was better, but it is what it is. The last thing we need to talk about is planned treasures. What is planned treasure? That's because we're not looking at it anymore. What is planned treasure? So we talked about mine treasure, which is most of the stuff that I give out. Opportunity treasure is when somebody's like, hey, I want to loot that body, or hey, is there anything in this room? And then opportunistic by the players. The last part is planned treasure. This is the notable loot of a scripted adventure. If I'm creating a dungeon or I am creating some sort of adventure, this is the notable, like the thing that they pick up and it's like, oh, this is the thing from the adventure that we're going to remember. It also may be the goal of the adventure itself, if it's like a plot MacGuffin kind of thing, a plot coupon that they're trying to pick up. They're like, oh, we need to go find the sword of Shemajabaj or whatever. That's going to be the notable loot in it. That's going to be the planned thing. It's pretty much never gold. I was going to say never gold, but there is a chance that it might be gold, but it would have to be like particularly important, or the gold is serving as a means to something else. Like, oh, specifically, we need this big glut of gold to get buy a ship or something like that. Like the idea is like there is intent. It's not just the gold by itself. It's that the gold is a step to getting something else. So in that way, it is a planned treasure and like a plot coupon in that kind of way. So if you were thinking about money, I would prefer to give out money in a different form. So those gems, the jewelry, banknotes, herbs and spices, different kinds of things that allow, like, tie up that money in a different way instead of just giving out a dragon's hoard and nothing but gold. That way there's always that little extra step. There's always like that one little extra thing that they need to do to transfer that. And that also means that, like, instead of giving them 1,000 gold, you can give them an item that's worth 1,000 gold, which when they turn around to sell it is really going to be 100 gold, which makes the gold aspect of the game much more manageable. But also, like we said, if they have that charisma person with them, they might be getting up to 500 gold instead. So they still get significantly more because they have the right party composition for that. And that's the strength of having one of those people in your party. So, yeah, I want to basically create an extra step for them because I want them to give an example or an excuse to visit a new place, to interact with a new NPC, to uncover a new adventure hook, or learn more about the world or something. So I don't want to be like I have picked up what is in Starfinder called basically a UPB? Oh, UBP, Universal Building Polymer, which is the exact same different. If you're not familiar with Starfinder, it is Pathfinder, but in space. But essentially, the way that works is that there are credits, but the one credit is always equal to 1 UBP, and UBP is a Universal Building Polymer. It is basically the crafting material. Like, it's just as good as the gold. And so having this idea that it's like, oh, well, these are more useful to me because we can just store these on the ship and fabricate whatever we need. It's actually more useful for us to have that as opposed to credits. Now, the only difference about playing Starfinder is that all your credits are pretty much digital. So that's nice that you don't actually have to worry about the logistics of carrying them around, besides having like a credit stick or a shard that you need to transfer the credits from. But I do like that aspect to be like, oh, instead of giving out gold that will be traded for those other resources, just kind of focus on putting those resources in front of them first. And one of the things that I talked about, so we have the craft stuff, we have the minor treasure, and there's magic items within that stuff, but that tends to be the more normal stuff that comes up. If it's planned treasure, it needs to be more than just like a cool, useful magic item. It should be tied to the narrative in some way. Be like that plot item or MacGuffin that we talked about earlier. It'd be tied to something, one of the PCs or their backstory, or is a very specific diegetic world building thing that you're doing. And this is one of the aspects where you can actually use coinage if you want to. If you really, like I said, D&D doesn't really support the idea that different kingdoms or nations or things like that have different currency, and that needs to be traded or anything, or that old currency is any better or different than new currency. But you could make that the case in your world if you want to, in your campaign. Like, here are these super ancient coins from an old empire. If you find the right person, if you find a collector, these might be worth a lot more to them. They're going to be really worthwhile. They're very valuable to potentially a collector. But if you're not looking for a collector, they basically need to be melted down to their base material cost, which is not probably very worthwhile. Again, if you need to, you can go look specifically at a trade goods section. It's a list that doesn't get used a lot out of the player's handbook, but is actually a table that is incredibly useful, especially for a dungeon master. I have gone too far. And I've lost too much. That's iron, so copper is about 5 silvers per pound. Silver is about 5 gold per pound. And guess what? Gold is about 50 gold per pound. So that tells you the kind of exchange rate there. So 50 gold, which is a pound, weighs about a pound, which is the exact same as it being melted down. But you still need to take that extra step. Like, you can't really show up and try to be like, here's this gold. Great. These are not useful for me. I need it in sort of like a raw material because that's going to be. And you have it turned into an ingot brought back, or else I'm going to probably pay you less. Because again, it would be worth that 50 gold if you had 50 gold of an old currency, worth of an old currency, and you brought it to somebody. Somebody's like, yeah, I mean, those coins aren't legal tender. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you 5 gold of legal tender for all of this. And, you know, step 2, question mark, step 3, profit. They're selling you at a very, very low price so they can make a very good sell price on the return. And then platinum's worth about 500 gold per pound. So it gives you an idea of how that. So you could do that if you wanted to use currency, but I use it in very specific means. It'd be like, this is something about it. Like, you're gonna learn something about the ancient group of people that were here, or you need to talk to this collector, and this collector can give you more information because maybe they're like an antiquarian or a historian or an archaeologist or something like that, and they can provide you that information, context. You can talk to them and they can give you leads on other ruins or other places these people might be, or why these people were here, or this is kind of leads you by the nose, your players by the nose, to an NPC who can give them more information that can help them progress their quest and stuff like that. So it's very useful in that. So in scripted adventures, when I'm dropping this plain treasure in, it's like there is always a reason for it to be in there. It's useful for something. Maybe this is something that's tied to an individual piece or backstory, like for a game that I've been playing in that I said that we're on a ship. My character that I'm playing in that is trying to collect a bunch of different pieces of arms and armor from his family that have been stolen by thieves. And so it gives him really good reason to be out adventuring, because he's like, I need to find information about these things, so we have to go to a lot of different places and talk to a lot of different people to try to find clues about it. So really easy way to be like, why is your character adventuring? Because they're trying to do this thing. But it also means when he gets the reward, it's like usually a very powerful magic item, and it's definitely tied to his PC, and every time those more and more pieces get put together, they have a synergy, they work together. And so as the campaign's gone on, and like I said, we're kind of approaching that 2-year point, he's got 3 pieces of it, I think. See, he's got yeah, he's got 3 pieces. I think there are 5 total, but I think he needs 2 more. I think he needs the armor. He's got the boots, he's got the weapon, and he's got the gauntlets. I think he needs the armor, and I don't remember what the other piece is. Either a shield or a helm or a cloak or something like that. And one other piece, I think. So you can tie it to a PC or their backstory. Very easy to do. And give them, you know, it feels like a very personalized item, and that's really what I want to do with all that stuff. So we have the 1d20 by adventure, 1d20 magic items by adventuring tier. So I kind of often use that same thing if I want to do that. I could show it to you guys. No, I would have to go find that document. I don't think it's really that worthwhile to show off. I talked about it already. Name of it is. Pull it up real quick. We won't spend a lot of time. Very quick. Pop in and show you. Services. Actually, it might be under shopping. One moment, let me find it. Not shopping. No, none there. It? Yes, it is. Okay. Here, I will show it to you guys. There's not a lot to this table, but it is useful. It's the same way that I use the minor item. Let me. There we go. So the magic item pricing. Accidentally. Make sure I didn't delete something. Not good. I don't believe I did. I do not. Okay. Good. But it doesn't have the crafting magic item info in it. I added that later. That's hand written in my notes. So magic item pricing. Again, minor major magic items is a thing that was introduced in Xanathar's guide and then pretty much quickly forgotten about in 5 and 5.5. So it's not as different, but it tells you, I have this mainly to show if you were going to look for buying a magic item, which is one of the things you can do as a downtime activity through the book, what the common cost for that is. So single use, but most importantly, this is what we're looking at. So single use, so kind of the 1 through 4 on the D10. Single use, that's your potions, your scrolls, feather tokens, things of that nature. Multi-use, there aren't a ton of these, so you have to be a little cautious with them or make stuff up for them. There are things like, you get something that you can use like 3 times before it's gone. The pigments, the magical pigments, are always a thing that jumps to my mind as like a multi-use consumable thing. Those things. You have charges. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll make a packet of things. So instead of finding like a potion, you find like 3 potions instead. Sometimes that's a little bit easier, even though that's worth a very different amount. Something with charges, that's usually a wand or staff or a rod or something like that. Usually a magical item like a magical implement for focus. Something that's got the standard, like it has 7 charges, it recharges 1d6 at the end of the day, sort of thing. And then permanent are just, they're permanent magic items. Those are your swords, your armor, spell gems, those kind of things. Anything that doesn't have any charges, doesn't have any multi-use, isn't a consumable, those are permanent magic items. So very similar. But the idea is that I want to make them notable in some way. So that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about the items. I've actually got 3 items right here that I've written down on index cards that are for my game that I'm running tomorrow. So they will get a choice of one of these. Don't get all of them, they get a choice of one. They're picking from a noble's treasury, and they have all 3 of these as some of their like powerful magic that they have at their disposal, which is not a ton. Those people don't have a ton of magic in this world. Like I said, actually having magic is incredibly dangerous for them, so they often like keep it locked away in these very specific boxes that like hold the radiation. They're like lead lined boxes that hold the magical radiation and then allow it not to be like scryed upon and stuff like that. So it's not only can't be found, but also it doesn't do the magical radiation of chaos energy. So we have 3 in here. We will do it this way. I'll just read these out. So give you an idea. So often when I'm making these items, especially these planned treasures, like I said, I want them to either be important to the character, the backstory. I want them to be tied to the narrative of something that's going on. They're a plot-centric item. Or I want them to be a diegetic world building. Like, so an aspect where I can teach players or provide information to the players, the world build in character about like, here are things that you learn about the world that your characters may already know that maybe you don't know as a player. So maybe you roll for it as to whether you've heard these names before and identify what they are. They're usually named items. So all of these are custom items. So none of these 3 items are anything that's out of the book. I like to make custom items whenever possible. They're fun. Try it. It's a very easy way to homebrew stuff. And if you screw it up, like I said, make a bunch of consumables. So that way, if you screw it up, you really only screw it up the one time. And you learn from it, and you kind of understand how to balance power stuff going forward. So the first one I have is the Ram of Suggestion. A small vial of twinkling purple. A command must be whispered into the liquid before use. The target must ingest the liquid and fail the wisdom saving throw, which is DC 16, to be affected by it. Otherwise, it functions as the spell Suggestion. If you've never used Suggestion, man, is that a super powerful level 2 spell if you know what you're doing with it. And that breaks the campaign real easily. I had a sorcerer in the campaign that used Suggestion a lot. The Suggestion is very open-ended, unlike something like Command, where it's very, very specific. It's got a very small time frame and has a very specific number of commands you can do with it now in the 2024 revamp. Suggestion is very long. It's 8 hours, but it is a concentration spell, so you have to do it out of combat. Primarily used for out of combat. But if you can isolate somebody and use suggestion on them, and you can get them to fail as a second level spell, you're able to they will follow whatever command you give them for up to 8 hours, assuming you don't break concentration. So one of the easiest things you can do, here's a pro tip for a player if you really want to make your life really easy, is basically to, as your suggestion, which it has to be like a sentence or two, like a phrase or two, whatever you suggest. It has to be something they can complete, and they can't like, self-harm themselves, essentially. You can basically just ask them, advise the person, suggest the person be your aid, essentially help you in whatever way possible that they can for 8 hours. It's simple, it's straightforward, to the point. They know what to do. Will they potentially fight on your behalf? No, they're generally not going to do something that will hurt themselves. But hey, if you capture somebody, like in the campaign that I was playing that I had this, or did this, we captured one of the like lieutenants of this assassin / thieves guild that was after us. They're like, cool, draw me the map of your hideout and tell me all the traps in your hideout. Tell me about everybody who's in there, who they are, what they do, what are the things I should look out for, where's all the valuables stored. I've got you for 8 hours. I want you to be as detailed as possible. And then you're going to come with us. Now you're going to stay in the back because you're not going to fight for us. But as we go through things, make sure that, number one, you told us the truth, which we already knew, because they were under suggestion and they failed. But incredibly useful spell, incredibly powerful for a second level, as long as you're using it out of combat. In combat, it's not very useful. Outside of combat, very, very, very useful. So it's a potion that does the same thing. Like I said, you have to, but then you can essentially like poison somebody with it. Very cool. The second one that I have is the Kiana saddle. This is actually a scroll. It's a magic spell. Custom magic spell. It is a second level spell scroll. This is a ritual. It takes an hour to cast. And that's, I'm assuming it's like, it takes an hour to cast if you were casting it bespoke, but also as a ritual. It takes an hour to cast. I don't care that much. I don't want to make it 2 hours to cast. And so it's always 1 hour. So it requires material components that are consumed in the casting, and that changes depending on what type of things that you try to summon. It is a summoning spell. It summons 3 elemental steeds. Their type is dependent on the material components put in. Both the type and the amount, like value. These steeds last until the end of a long rest. It is a concentration spell as well. So they're super useful for exploring stuff. So you'll notice that the way that I was building this up is that I was like, hey, here's a thing that's really good for you in a social encounter. So I gave them a social encounter thing they could choose from. Kiana Saddle is an exploration thing. This is something useful for you guys just running around and doing stuff in the world. So if you use the 10 gold version, 10 gold of materials, you get earth elementals. And they have land walk 60. So they have a 60-foot speed, so they're as fast as a horse. And they ignore difficult terrain. Any sort of like earth stride, so anything like earthbound kind of thing. So they don't have a climb speed, but they can like go up and down and through difficult terrain very, very easily. They're incredibly useful. If you use 25 gold, you get the 3 water elemental steeds. They have a swim speed of 60 feet. Now, they can go underwater. They can also ride across the top of water. But you don't get air bubble or water breathing, so you gotta cast that spell yourself if you want that, which I don't think water breathing is concentration. Could be wrong about that. So, not as useful for you probably underwater unless you have some way to breathe underwater. But if you're playing a campaign like mine is, which has primarily been set on an island, there's a lot of water you got to go across. So this is incredibly useful. And a lot cheaper than buying mounts, depending on how many times you use it. Because buying 3 horses would cost you 150 gold. You can definitely cast Earth type 15 times before you meet that same cost. Super useful. you can summon a fire elemental's steed. That's 50 gold. They get levitate 20 feet. So it works like the levitate spell, is that they can move up or down, kind of like a hot air balloon. They can move up or down depending on the fire. Again, riding fire has its own problems as a person. So unless you have some sort of immunity to fire or heavy resistance to fire, it is a really difficult one, but it is a super useful one if you're like, we just need to get up a cliff face very fast, and we will take like the 1d6 fire damage or whatever it is per round to get up there. So, but it works like the levitate spell. So you control the z-axis, but wind and anything else can move you around. Like a hot air balloon is how it works. And then if you pay 100 gold, you get the air elemental version, which gives you a fly speed of 60. So expensive, but very, very useful. It allows you to avoid a lot of other stuff. So, like I said, this is the exploration one that they can get. And it's a spell scroll. Now, they don't have a wizard in their party, but they don't have anybody who can make more spell scrolls. I believe that is a wizard. Wizards are the only people who can make spell scrolls, if I remember correctly. Lots of people can use spell scrolls, but I think only wizards can make them. But I could be wrong. So this is an uncommon spell scroll, which makes it worth about, looking at the table, about 350 gold is about what that's worth. It's very expensive, but super useful. So we had our social encounter one. We've got our exploration pillar one. That means this last one's got to be something that's very combat oriented. So when I was coming up with it, I was like, I want something that's useful, but for each, like all of these would be useful for any character to have. Like I wanted that to be more of a utility item, so it's not just like, oh, and the cleric gets a cool thing, but nobody else gets a cool thing, or the fighter gets a cool thing, but nobody else gets a cool thing. So I wanted something everybody could use. The last one is a Shingle of Dulce. This is a coin-sized scale of coral red color. When broken, the holder gains resistance to all damage types until the end of their next long rest. So this is a one and done, but it's incredibly powerful. Like I said, give them very powerful stuff, just make it super temporary. Yeah, sure, and this gives you can make one of your guys like a real monster for like an adventure, but at the end of the day, days pass relatively quickly in my campaign because of the way that we track them. He's done with it, or they're done with it, whatever it is. And it's useful for anybody. Sure, we have a fighter, and that's useful for them, but hey, maybe you want to throw it on. We have a druid in the party. Guess what? This works with all their wild shapes too. Incredibly powerful. And turn them into a real combat monster for a day, and then they go back to normal. But hey, you want to make sure the cleric stays up. If we had a wizard in the party, it would also be super useful for the wizard. But each of these ones, based off of their name, except for the suggestion, this one is kind of generic. But really the question here is, why does this person have this thing? Which would, if the player characters think about it for a little bit, if the players think about it, it'd be like, why would a noble have something that allows them to cast suggestion? And it's specifically used primarily through drinking. Something you kind of like a poison you put into somebody's goblet of wine, and when they drink it, hit them with the suggestion. So it kind of tells you a little bit about the political arrangements and stuff that's going on. It kind of gives it diegetically, through context clues, you're like, oh, interesting. Is that something that could be used on us at some point? Will we start paying more attention about who offer us food and drink? And maybe should we consider poisons when we offer it to other people? The Shingle of Dulce, I talked about the boxes for the magic items earlier. They're called cricket boxes. Cricket is the name of what is like the world's most famous, in this setting, world's most famous artificer. or tinkerer. Their name's Cricket. That's their boxes. They're Cricket boxes. Lots of people make them, but they're just known as Cricket boxes. Dulce, similar. This is a barbarian. Bear totem barbarian. So lots of resistances. They are technically a dragonborn. So a shingle, which is a little of a misdirect, but it is a coin-sized scale of red color code. Essentially a scale of their skin. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just an alchemical replication of that. Who's to know for sure? But they can do the check and be like, oh, you know, you have heard of this person. This person's like an incredibly famous warrior. Seem to kind of have like an Achilles kind of vibe to them. It's like they seem like they could take tons of damage and they could never be knocked down. You can kind of give them that vibe. And then Kiana, which is just a kind of pulling in the language aspect. Kiana means essentially elements or elemental or from the elements. So an elemental saddle, this is for elemental steeds. This is also very intuitive because elements and mastering them with magic is a very integral part of the current campaign there. So you can see that all of those kind of hit all of that. Either it's got something that tells you something more about the people in the world, or tells you about the world building itself, or is something that is very plot centric. Like the drama suggestion is an incredibly plot centric one. There's a way that this can be used to avoid a very major combat that I'm thinking that will be coming up in the future. This is a very easy way to get around that if they can figure out how to get the drama suggestion on one particular person. They can avoid a very difficult combat that I can foresee in the future, or just encounter, probably a combat. They can avoid that in the future if they use the suggestion on them. But, you know, if they don't use it there, they could use it in a myriad of other ways that I will probably not be expecting. They can waltz past a very easy thing later on. But again, the nice thing is they can only do it the once. Now, the Kiana saddle is a spell scroll. So like I said, they can't, I don't believe anybody in the party can replicate scrolls. But they can take it to somebody who could replicate scrolls. And so, which would be, I think if I was getting this as a player, I would be like, that would be list item number 1 on the docket. Be like, let's get a duplicate of this, so that way I can use it without getting rid of it totally. Because it's a custom spell, it's like, how are you going to find it again? But yeah, I think that pretty much hits everything we wanted. I think the last thing that I want to talk about, and actually, you know, I just moved away from the document. I can just add it to that document, because it needs to go on there anyways, are my crafting rules. So crafting, I said, giving them the material components and the ability to use stuff is, I like that a lot better than just handing out just straightforward. And I'm probably going to die on that hill, because I just think it's the best way to incorporate it. So crafting, it's just crafting items. It's actually not crafting magic items. It's just crafting items in general. And these are my rules. They're kind of close to D&D's rules, but also not. They're just very different. Well, they're not that different. So you want to make something. This is particularly useful for magic items, but anybody who has any sort of tool proficiency can do this. So you need half the item's cost in materials. Let's do an example. Let's say that I wanted to make a single-use common healing potion. I want to brew a healing potion. Great. There are ways to do that that's already outlined in D&D. These are my homebrew rules. They're just slightly different. Actually, you know what? Let's do something different. Let's say we were talking about the Kiana saddle, so let's do that. The Kiana saddle is a 2nd level ritual, but it is a spell scroll. I want to make a spell scroll. So you're going to need 175 gold pieces in material components to make the scroll. Perfect. Done. That's half the item's cost of materials. You also need tools, workspace, time to do that thing. Time, particularly in days. And you might at this point go, okay, so how long does it take to make it? I don't know. It'll depend on how good you are at crafting. So this is where it comes up next. So you hit to you have a in. That's nomenclature from different games. If you're D&D specific, it's essentially the same as DC, except they use target number in a lot of other games. Some DC equal to half items cost. So you have to do basically a daily crafting check. This is a downtime, primarily a downtime activity. There are ways to get around that. So if you say, I want to make another spell scroll of Kiana Saddle, great. You need 175 gold in materials, and you need to make 175 sum total of crafting checks. Obviously, that's not a thing you're going to do in one day, but the amount of time you take in between them is not important. As long as you still have access to that stuff, you still have the tools, the workspace, the time, and the materials to do it. This assumes that you're doing an 8-hour day. So this does mean that crafting takes slower. So even if you're making a healing potion is generally not something you can make in a single. Because you need to, well, you could if you made a really, really good check. Because you got to make essentially a DC 25 check in one go. But the great thing is that if you miss that, which you probably will, you need the sum of that. So that just becomes a running total. So let's say that we spent a day and we're going to make a crafting check to try to make this spell scroll. Let's say that we have a +5 to it. Great, I got a 19. Well, 19's not 175. What does that mean? That means that I have 19 of 175 complete. So if I have more days, I do more checks. If, say, you have a week of downtime, you might go, all right, I got 6 more days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all I'm working on. Great. I got 60 plus another 30 for my days off. So I got 90 from the end of the week. So it's taking me a long time to make this. That's okay. If it was easy to do, you would just be doing that. You would just be making spell scrolls instead of doing adventuring. So that leaves us at 109. So we're halfway complete with it. And that's, if we had a bunch of downtime, if we had like a month to do it, you continue to make these checks. But you could also be like, we actually have to go do an adventure thing, and then when we get back from adventure, I'll pick this up. Or do a rush check. At disadvantage. Now again, the same way that you make other magic items is like, if you want to pay for an apprentice or you have somebody who's capable of helping you with it that's a PC, you can get advantage on the checks, which is really useful. You can also do a rush check at disadvantage. Now if you have somebody helping you, it goes from disadvantage to normal rolls, which is also very useful. This is also incredibly useful because it's perfect for elves. Now, those of you who have played D&D for a while, you know that elves get trance. They do not have to sleep. The trance takes how long? 4 hours. That means that every day that you guys are adventuring, generally the elf has 4 hours in which they're not really doing anything, while the rest of the party's still sleeping. Well, if you make your elf a crafter, they can continue to craft things. So especially things like brew potions, that's really, really easy to do. Make spell scrolls, stuff like that. You don't really need like a big workshop. Now, if you're trying to do something like you have artisan's tools for like masonry or something like that, like you have mason's tools, you need like a workshop to do that. That's not something you can do on the road. But if you have like wood carving or something of that nature, you can do that while you're on the road. And it's a real easy way for characters, like in character, to make some extra money on the side, as well as in addition to making magic items. So it's perfect for elves. Waiting while others rest. Other PCs rest. They got 4 hours to do stuff, so it's like, why not go ahead and make another check? Let's say that our elf in this example is like, you know, I got some time. We're on the road. We're heading out to somewhere. I'll go ahead and make another crafting check. I'm waiting. Ooh, would have loved to have that 20, but we got 9 instead. Great. It's basically free money. They get free crafting time. So they get to add another 9. They're like, cool, I'm up to 118. So probably by the end of this adventure, I'll have the scroll done. Just like a little extra side thing. And like I said, this is for crafting any sort type of item. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a magic item. Let's say that we had a person, let's say our ranger PC. And they want to do wood carving. They're going to do some whittling. This is like a thing they just do on the side. It kind of keeps them busy while they're camping and doing that kind of stuff. Well, for this instance, let's say that they are an elf PC. That way they can, and otherwise you still need the downtime. Now the way that I do camping is slightly different. If you want to take a rest day while you're doing overland travel, it's like that's a 24-hour period where you're not really doing anything. I would allow you to spend the full day doing this wood carving check. Because you don't really need to get up and run around to do that. Not really a lot of exertion. Whitland. He's whittling, y'all. Well, they can make this disadvantage. And the nice thing is like, you just tell me the material you're using. Like, oh, all right, maybe I've got some really, really nice wood, some like zebra wood or something, like a really exotic wood. So let's say it's like 25 gold. Get 25 gold worth of exotic wood. So again, another great way is like if you pick up some really nice materials that work with one of your artisans, start to do that. So 25 gold of exotic wood. So you know that you can make something that's 25 Whitland checks. So disadvantage is something they just work on in camp. How long would it take them to do that? Then they get a +3. Alright, they rolled a 1. Now luckily, 1 never means a failure in this context. Just like skill rolls technically aren't supposed to crit fail. So they get a 4. They're like, it's a rough start. It's going to be a slow process. Maybe there's a big knot in it or something that they weren't really trying to avoid. And well, here we are. One of these days I'll get the right thing. There we go. Close these other. Any of these open. No, they got 4. 0, 4. They keep going again. We're adding 3 to this. Alright. You get a 9. And a 14. That'll get them across the finish line. $914 would be 23, plus the 4 they already have. So they've gotten the 25 and 25 thing. So they turn around when they get back to town. They can sell this wooden carving. And you know, they can make up whatever they want the carving to be. And the value is about 50G. So they know if they're selling it, they're only probably going to get 5 gold from it. But if they have somebody who, like we said, is a charisma-based character, they can be like, hey, could you do me a favor and see if you can find a buyer for this when you're in the market? You go around, they maybe make a persuasion check. Oh, cool. They get 25 gold from it. Well, 25 gold, not nothing. If you were using resources that you found as treasure, that's free money. So you got That 25 gold worth of exotic wood fully translated to 25 gold of actual currency, half a healing potion. That's nice. So you can, if you use the time and effort, you can transfer that one-to-one value across if you're using it for crafting. Or you could also, like we said, be brewing potions or writing spell scrolls for yourself and for your party. Very useful thing to do. But that is it. Those are my 3 tiers of loot. Hopefully that's useful for you guys. Talking about our pocket contents, that's our opportunity loot, our minor treasure, which is most of the stuff you find, and then our planned treasure, which are these more specific, like diegetic, world building things, or very specific for PC, or very plot centric items that we give out. That usually I try to make custom items or give them a name or do all that kind of stuff. Sorry about the internet issue. So again, this is part 2, apparently. So 3rd time's the charm. We're actually gonna get it done. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Hey, if you like this sort of content, go ahead and like this video. Go like the first one too, please. I'll see if maybe, I don't want to screw up the quality too bad, but I'll see if I can maybe grab them and download them and stitch them together in editor and re-upload it maybe as a video. Maybe that would be better. We'll see. But I think the compression is going to screw that up too much. I don't have the raw file. Because I was playing just live streaming and forget it. But hopefully this is useful for you. So like it if you like the content. If you want to see more content like that, we got tons of it over here on the YouTube channel. So check it out. It's at RedRaggedFiend over on YouTube. Give us a little subscribe. Give us a little comment. That helps with the algorithm. It shoves it out to other people. If you guys have any questions, you can drop those down there. As well, I try to check back and answer questions and stuff like that. Point you towards some of the other videos that I've done. Thanks for hanging out with me. These are always fun to talk about D&D. For hanging out, and we'll see you guys next time. Alright?